I'm going to go back to my sports analogy. Remember that from this morning? Those of you who are not here to hear that, why were you not here to hear that? All right, I want you to give the same reception as you would for an athlete that hits a home run, or especially a guy who's 8 feet tall, standing 6 inches from the basket, paid $12 million a year to put it in a hoop, and the people just go nuts. That's the kind of reception I want for our next speaker. He is the president of Evangelism Explosion International and one of our new sponsors for the Values Voters Summit. Last year, Evangelism Explosion International, now get this, folks, listen. They equipped more than 1 million believers worldwide to be witnesses for Christ, and as a result, by the grace of God, over 10 million people made a profession of faith in Jesus Christ. He's going to come. Yeah, that's worth clapping for. All right, now there we go. There we go. If I was 8 feet tall and dropped a basket, this whole roof would come off. But if I say 10 million people found Christ, I get the golf clap. Oh, yes. So let me just say that again. Last year, through the work of Evangelism Explosion International, 10 million people came to Christ. I believe you. So now, would you please give a warm welcome to the president of Evangelism Explosion International, number 33, Dr. John Sorensen.
Well, good morning, and by the way, praise the Lord. It was only through the grace of God that happened, and Christians that are willing to obey God and do as He's commanded us in these days, that we see that happening literally all over the world. More than 1 million last year in mainland China alone, and so God is continuing to bless and grow the work. Well, good morning. My name is John Sorensen. I'm the president of Evangelism Explosion, and I'm here today to talk to you about one of my very favorite topics in all the world, and that is Christian statesmanship. Now, perhaps some of you are familiar with Evangelism Explosion. I know you are because I've heard some of your testimonies in the past few days, but perhaps you're not aware that we have the D. James Kennedy Center for Christian Statesmanship right here in Washington, D.C., and in fact, we have Dr. Kennedy's daughter with us today, Jennifer Kennedy Cassidy, and her husband Chip are right back here. Is that right, Jennifer? If you're here, stand up and let us say good morning. We've just celebrated our 20th anniversary here on Capitol Hill at 402 New Jersey Avenue Southeast. It's 4 blocks from the Capitol. Literally, if you guys could hit a golf ball, you could come into our front yard, hit the golf ball, and hit the Capitol. Of course, they'd stick you in prison right after that. We do have a really good prison ministry. We'll visit you. But that's how close it is, and because of that, we're able to minister to members on Capitol Hill. Let me show you just a quick video so you can see what we do at the center.
Dear friend, we are in the midst of a war of values, a war against God and His truth. And it's why we're now in Washington, D.C., striving to spread the gospel and minister to those Christians who are trying to make a difference. I won't give up.
Undeniably, Dr. Kennedy was about Christianizing the world. He wanted every person on earth to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. Well, to do that, you have to have the liberty to do that. He had this idea of developing a center at what he called the Rome of today in Washington, D.C., to influence leaders so that we could preserve the right to be able to share the gospel.
I found the D. James Kennedy Center for Christian Statesmanship as a first-year freshman legislator in 2011. Quite frankly, I was looking for places where there was a witness on this hill and for people that were engaged in what was happening, and found it in the center. What they do with interns and staff members and reach out to members and the training that they provide and the consistent witness and ministry that's here is very unique.
Christians are meeting here. There are events that are taking place in this building all during the day, all week long. So I think the ministry is today positioned to be more effective in its outreach than it's ever been before. And in some ways that I had never even imagined 20 years ago.
I'm excited about taking the helm at the Center for Christian Statesmanship. Dr. Kennedy encouraged us to run for Congress, those of us who held a Christian worldview as well as a concern for the United States. There are essentially two clauses. Washington, D.C. is where Christ's light must shine, and it can only shine as the result of Christians being that light of Christ.
Now, you might ask the question, why would we have the Center for Christian Statesmanship in Washington, D.C.? And here, it's a simple answer: because America desperately today needs Christian statesmen. These are men and women who will live for the cause of Christ and for the benefits of others and not for themselves. Now, while it is true that our freedoms are shrinking here in these United States, let me tell you something that you may not know. There have been times I've wanted to kiss customs officers as I'm coming back into the United States, because this is a special place. We still enjoy a measure of freedom of speech, religious liberty, unlike almost any other nation on earth. And listen, I travel around the world. I could tell you stories. Well, let me ask you a question. What makes America different? Why are we so exceptional? Well, I believe that we're so exceptional amongst all the nations on the planet because there are men and women, especially in our founding days. These are the ideas and the people that founded and built this nation. And those people and the principles that they held are responsible for the blessings of liberty that you and I enjoy today. And they were unabashedly Christian. It was Christian statesmen who, from America's earliest days, offered the moral leadership and the vibrant devotion to liberty that gave us this great land that we love. William J. Federer, he's a noted author, he's a speaker, he's one of America's leading experts on the influence of Christianity in America's founding. He also happens to be a senior fellow at the Center for Christian Statesmanship.
The founders were all not just Christians, they were Christians of particular denominations that did not get along. But in the crucible of the revolution, they became one and saw themselves as Christian statesmen rather than members of different denominations. That was a real miracle.
Many of the founders had been influenced by the Great Awakening, a Christian revival that swept the countryside a generation before.
Not only did they unite in opening the first session of the Continental Congress with prayer, but just 2 months before the Declaration of Independence, the same Continental Congress unanimously passed a declaration of fasting and prayer, quote, through the merits and mediation of Jesus Christ.
While there were a few of the founding fathers who were not Orthodox Christians, they were all intimately familiar with the Bible. Take Benjamin Franklin, who attended every kind of Christian worship, called for public prayer, and contributed to all denominations. In fact, it was while the Constitution was being written during that long, hot summer in Philadelphia of 1787 that Dr. Franklin made this impassioned plea.
In the beginning of the contest with Great Britain, when we were sensible of danger, we had daily prayer in this room for divine protection. Our prayers, sir, were heard, and they were graciously answered. And have we now forgotten that powerful friend? Or do we imagine we no longer need his assistance?
After Benjamin Franklin made his impassioned speech at the Constitutional Convention, all of the delegates went home, and it was the job of the delegates now to convince their states to ratify the Constitution. Well, one of those states was New York, and Alexander Hamilton, who was a delegate from the state of New York, enlisted a friend of his, John Jay, to help him convince their fellow New Yorkers to ratify the Constitution. Now, Jay, who was the very first Chief Justice of the United States, said the following:
With equal pleasure, I have often taken notice that Providence has been pleased to give this one connected country to one united people, a people descended from the same ancestors, speaking the same language, professing the same religion, attached to the same principles of government, very similar in their manners and customs, and who, by their joint counsels, arms, and efforts, fighting side by side throughout a long and bloody war, have nobly established general liberty and independence.
Now, the well-documented claim that America is a Christian nation nonetheless has been highly controversial in these days. And one of the reasons for that is that much of the evidence has been withheld from American students, as is a point made by the late Dr. D. James Kennedy, the founder of Evangelism Explosion, and a man who is one of the leading voices calling for a return to godliness here in America.
There is a virtual paranoia on the part of textbook writers and publishers and editors concerning the religious foundings of this country, and almost all of it has been expurgated from our textbooks. Therefore, we have tens of millions of people in this country who haven't got the foggiest idea where this country came from or who started it.
Dr. Kennedy mentioned censorship of history. This is actually a Marxist tactic called deconstruction. Separate people from their past, get them into a neutral where they don't know where they're coming from, and then brainwash them into the future you have planned for them. It's actually a sales technique. If I was a toothpaste salesman, the first thing I would do would be to say negative things about the toothpaste you are currently using. If you're using that old stuff, it'll eat the enamel off your teeth. Ooh, you're repulsed by it. Now I have you into a neutral where you're open-minded. What are all the toothpastes out there nowadays? Then I can give you my pitch for this tartar control breath freshener stuff. This is applied nationally, where students are told the founders took land from Indians and sold people into slavery. The students are repulsed by them. Now you have the students in a neutral. What are all the belief systems out there nowadays? Then you can give them your pitch for the socialism, LGBT, transgendered bathroom, and Islam and other agendas.
Well, sadly, America is not the nation that it once was at its founding, maybe not what it was 30 or 20 or even 10 years ago. And frankly, the pace of change is picking up speed almost daily. Let me just give you a few examples of some of the things that document America's plummeting moral decline. Number one, we aren't getting married like we used to. About 50% of Americans over 18 are married. This is compared to 72% when I was born in 1961. The so-called nuns, people without any religious affiliation, that's up 5% since 2008. And it now sits at 20% of the population of the United States. And number three, more than 1 million tiny human beings are killed each year by abortion, robbing the very least amongst us of their very first birthday. Friends, as Dr. Kennedy once said, we are no longer on the slippery slope. We've actually fallen over the edge and we're literally hanging on by our fingernails. No, the trends are not good. Evangelical philosopher Francis Schaeffer warned more than 30 years ago that secular values had already displaced America's long-standing Judeo-Christian moral tradition. Speaking in 1982, just 2 years before his death, Dr. Schaeffer listed the moral failings in Western society, things like permissiveness and pornography, the breakdown of the family, abortion, infanticide, and euthanasia, but strongly emphasized that these were just symptoms of something much more fundamental, much more deeper, as he explained.
All these things and many more are only the results. We may be troubled with the individual thing, but in reality, we are missing the whole thing if we do not see each of these things and many more as only symptoms of the deeper problem. And that is a change in our society, a change in our country, a change in the Western world, from a Judeo-Christian consensus to a humanistic one.
Now, America, frankly, is much further down the road than Dr. Schaeffer or Dr. D. James Kennedy could have imagined. I mean, after all, who could possibly have conceived that just 2 years ago, our national moral debate would be around open bathrooms and locker rooms and on confused and predatory people of the opposite sex? But that's where we are as a nation today, and it raises an obvious question for us today. Is there hope? left for America today? Is it possible that this nation, which was right now openly celebrating in its laws open rebellion against Almighty God, that it will somehow correct its course? It will be once more this city set upon a hill, a beacon of hope for all of the world. Now, the answer, I believe, quite simply is yes. And that's what we work for every day at the D. James Kennedy Center for Christian Statesmanship. Our mission is to supply that which is most needed and too often, frankly, missing, excluded from Capitol Hill and the life of our nation, namely faith in God and in His Son, Jesus Christ. We're privileged to have as our director the Honorable John Hostetler. This is a man who served in Congress for 6 terms representing Indiana's 8th District, and he's now serving as the director for the Center for Christian Statesmanship.
When I was in Congress, the Center for Christian Statesmanship was a godsend to me. I came in 1995, and I can tell you that Washington, D.C. Was a lonely place for an engineer from Blairsville, Indiana. The Center for Christian Statesmanship was that oasis in Washington, D.C., where I could take part in Bible studies, speak to other members and staff at the Politics and Principle Luncheons in the Statesmanship Institute, and the other events that are designed to strengthen members of Congress and their staff. Today, I now have the privilege of passing that on.
Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma.
The need is great for light and for salt in this place. But the center is also actively reaching out to people that have no perspective on faith. They're in a brand new location. Many of them come from all over the country. They've not really considered a walk with God, and they suddenly come to Washington, D.C. So there's a tremendous impact to be able to represent the gospel here that the center does on a daily basis.
It's vitally important that when these young men and women from the staff or members of Congress leave the center after their training in evangelism or statesmanship, that they understand that they are to be themselves that salt that preserves our society for the next generation.
Senator Lankford is the recipient of the 2015 Distinguished Christian Statesman Award, given annually to honor individuals who combine excellence in public service with character and faith in God.
Many people have ridden Washington, D.C. off and say D.C. is a dark place and far from God and godless people that are there, and I always laugh and say at the very end in Sodom and Gomorrah, God was calling people out, but that's not what He's doing. He's still sending people in to Washington, D.C. And quite frankly, it's very consistent with His character if it's a dark place for God to send light there.
You know, that really is what each one of us who are believers in Jesus Christ are called to do, to send light into the darkness wherever we are. Now, aren't you grateful for Christian statesmen on Capitol Hill like the former Congressman John Hostetler and Senator Lankford we have today? Amen. And the truth is, there are many more like them. In 2008, then Representative Mike Pence was the Distinguished Christian Statesman of the Year award by the Center. You know, now he's a governor, and maybe you didn't know, he's the vice presidential candidate.
I do want to thank the Center for Christian Statesmanship for the extraordinary work of this ministry here on Capitol Hill. To those of you who have made that work possible, just know that the investment that you've made in this ministry has impacted the lives of men and women serving on the floor of the Congress and hundreds of young men and women who are serving in Washington, D.C. today.
Now, this honor we give every year, it lifts up the idea of Christian statesmanship, and we honor people who live that out in word and deed. Now, some of you perhaps were at our banquet last night where we honored Matt Bevin. You just heard from the governor. He's the governor of the Commonwealth of Kentucky as the 2016 Distinguished Christian Statesman. And this year, we established a second award, a Board of Directors Leadership Award for outstanding service in the service to Christ in the public arena. And this year, the winner was Tony Perkins. Ladies and gentlemen, please know this, that we will continue to lift high the standard of Christian statesmanship because, you see, religious liberty is at stake. And when religious liberty is lost, all other liberties soon follow. I invite you to come to our session, our breakout session this afternoon on how to become a Christian statesman citizen. We have two great speakers, Bill Federer and John Hostetler, who will be able to share with you on how it is that we can live out the we the people. We can take it seriously. We can, for ourselves and also for our posterity, live this out in our day. How do we grasp hold of our God-given rights and the rights that were given to us in the Constitution to determine our political destiny and to preserve liberty for others, our families in this great republic? That will be our focus this afternoon, and I encourage you to come so that you as believers can learn how to be salt and light in the place that you've been planted. Folks, it sure is a lot easier to send light and to share the gospel into places where we have the liberty and the right to do that. And frankly, that's what's at stake. The truth is that from these shores, the gospel of Jesus Christ has literally gone all over the world. Let me ask you a question. What nation has sent more missionaries than the United States? What nation has funded more mission enterprise than these United States? Even today, where we are, the United States is still the #1 country for sending missionaries around the world. You see, it's the gospel of Jesus Christ that makes a difference, and it's men and women compelled by that gospel to live out their faith as Christian statesmen. That is what will make America a city on a hill once more, and that's why, if you and I truly want to see America changed and redeemed, then we must pray. We must pray that people will be changed by the power of the gospel in these days. And as individuals are changed, whole communities are changed, and then our nation will be changed. We certainly must vote in a way that expands our ability to carry forward the mission of Christ. And frankly, if you don't mind me preaching for a minute, we need to stop talking about the lesser of two evils. And we need to praise God for the fact that He's given us a choice that will preserve religious liberty in America today. And frankly, if Dr. Kennedy were here, he would say that we must engage in the political process, and that includes running for elected office. Perhaps some of you in this room should be running for public office today. The bottom line is this: we must understand that real enduring change only comes from the human heart. And as the human heart is transformed, then other things are transformed as well. That inner transformation is only possible through the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And when the gospel changes hearts and minds, then simply everything else changes. And that is true for Washington, D.C. as well. And that is how America will be saved. As Dr. Kennedy said, it's both the hardest and the easiest of tasks. But it's why he remained an absolute optimist into his very last breath, because, you see, he believed that one day a generation was coming of Christian men and women that would rise up, and they would take up this mission of carrying the gospel, and the ills of society that we face would simply disappear like the dew before a rising sun. Maybe we are that generation. Maybe we are that people. Maybe you and I have been called for such a time as this. And my prayer for you is this: may God grant you, may God grant me the ability to believe and the courage to get up in these days and act. Thank you. May God bless you, and may God bless these United States of America.